Doctor Who is back for one confirmed Christmas special written by Russell T Davies in 2026. But earlier this month, we were not so confident, with writer Robert Shearman talking to Doctor Who magazine on his concern for the future of Doctor Who, Big Finish putting an end to their Torchwood monthly range, and a Blu-ray collection release which saw a not so positive reception. Welcome to this month in Doctor Who. So of course the biggest news of October was the announcement of the 2026 Christmas special on the 28th. Following the finale of season 2 in May with the surprise regeneration of Ncuti Gatwa into Billie Piper, fans were quick to point out not just their concerns with this ending, but that the future of Doctor Who remains as uncertain as it did back in 1989. But 5 months later, the BBC announced this one-off Christmas special for next year. Notably, Disney Plus have ended their partnership with the BBC following their 26-episode deal from the 60th anniversary specials to the end of season 2 and the spin-off series The War Between the Land and the Sea, which was also announced to be releasing in December in the UK and early 2026 in the rest of the world. Aside from this, not much else is known about the future of Doctor Who. According to Lindsay Salt, the BBC's director of drama, they will be announcing plans for the next series in due course, which will ensure the TARDIS remains at the heart of the BBC. Who knows what the original plan was? We do know that the finale of season 2 was set to be entirely different, with Carol Ann Ford recently confirming that as well. RTD will have to pull out all of the stops for this special in order to win back the hearts of fans. Obviously, we can assume that Russell T Davies didn't plan for the series and the future of Doctor Who to come out like this, so whether he's going to choose to close off all of these kind of loose threads that he's introduced, like Susan, obviously, the boss, the master being a tooth, you know, all that kind of, obviously Billie Piper being the Doctor, that's the main one, but it's all a bit up in the air. You know, who knows whether he'll actually decide to continue that and try and close it all off in one big special. Presumably not, because he never has previously in the last few years, so we'll just have to wait and see. But it's not just us fans that he'll have to win back the hearts of. In fact, earlier this month, Robert Shearman spoke to Doctor Who magazine in an interview regarding the release of the 2 unique novelizations of his most iconic Big Finish audio dramas, The Chimes of Midnight and Jubilee, which released on the 9th. Before I get into those though, notably, Shearman commented on the controversial surprise regeneration in the reality war. The show is probably as dead as we've ever known it. After 1989, we had for years a current Doctor. Now everything feels retrogressive. No one's going to start writing books with a Billie Piper Doctor because no one knows what that means. Shearman, however, responded to a fan on X following the announcement with his excitement on the news. Now, like I mentioned, Robert Shearman had 2 releases of his own in October. For those who don't know, Shearman wrote a small handful of insanely popular Big Finish audio dramas, mostly in 2002 and 2003, with The Chimes of Midnight and Jubilee being some of the most successful and praised audio dramas, not just from that era, but from Big Finish as a whole. He went on to revise Jubilee into the similarly popular Series 1 episode Dalek, which shared a lot of moments and plot points. Robert Shearman had not been particularly involved within Doctor Who after 2007, although he has said that he had briefly spoken to Stephen Moffat about writing for Series 5. Eventually, he would come to write my favourite Doctor Who novelisation of his Series 1 story Dalek in 2021, and we can assume this is kind of what led to the novelisations of these stories. These new novels, of course, revitalise the original audio stories, but do in fact change a few bits here and there. Notably, in The Chimes of Midnight, there's a whole added section towards the end that kind of changes the plot twist or the reveal of the bad guy, basically. They were released as both a standard and limited edition hardback, with the limited edition hardbacks featuring the original cover art of the Big Finish audios and containing extra illustrations. The 500 copies for this limited edition sold out within hours of their announcement on April 12th, but personally, I'm much more of a fan of the standard edition covers. I've never been too keen on realistic looking covers, like when a book gets a film or TV adaptation and then gets an ugly, now an award-winning Netflix show or something or other plastered onto it. The £22 price tag is crazy though. Fortunately, in May 2026, we'll get a paperback release, and fingers crossed they keep the beautiful cover art, because that's just less than 2 weeks before my birthday, so take notes, guys. Also in Doctor Who magazine from this month, we had other interviews with Murray Gold on the creation of Dug-a-Doo in Season 2's The Interstellar Song Contest, extracts from a 2017 interview with 80s Doctor Who writer Chris Bidmead, Carol Ann Ford, Katie Manning and Rob Crane on their contributions to the successor of the Adventures Before book, The Adventures After, which released on the 23rd, and Sophie Aldred on revisiting Ace's introduction following Dragonfire in the newest 7th Doctor Adventures box set from Big Finish entitled Wicked. Backwards and in Heels by Alison Winter sees the duo in 1920s Soho on shady business before they end up in a future ski resort against sinister shadows in The Price of Snow by Catherine Armitage, and finally encounter ancient evil alongside Don Quixote in 15th century Spain in The Ingenious Gentleman by Alan Ronald. Finally, in Doctor Who magazine, the first part in a new comic strip began with Field Trip Part 1, and we also got a mini magazine of production notes from Series 2 from the pages of Doctor Who magazine issues 360 to 371. Let's take a break from some of the more serious stuff and look at some more optimistic releases. October started off with BBC Audio releasing 2 new series audio originals in Firefall by Beth Axford, read by Michelle Asante, and Counter-Strike by Una McCormack, read by Claire Corbett. These stories feature Belinda and the 15th Doctor exploring mysterious happenings in the village of Drummondville following a meteor, and find themselves on Colony 5 in the middle of a war between automated drones. On the same day, we had Big Finish's first October release with the second story in the popular 9th Doctor's Adventure series. The Last Days of the Powerless State by Timothy X. Atack finds the Doctor and Rose in 2036 London in an investigation into the invisible killer, Mr. Fingers. This story follows the first story in this series, Snare by Tim Foley, in August, which are notable in not being released as part of a box set, unlike the previous 3 series, although this of course could be changed retroactively. They are of course more notable for reuniting Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper as the Doctor and Rose since Eccleston's departure from Doctor Who in The Parting of the Ways in 2005. Following this release, Big Finish announced the next part in this series, that being Dare You by Lisa McMullen, the concluding part in an unofficial trio of Powerless State stories, which sees Rose still visiting Jackie following the events of Father's Day and the previous 2 audio adventures, although here a sinister force that brings out the worst in humanity is now plaguing the estate. Sticking to the Big Finish theme and also returning companions, the wonderful Annika Wills has been announced to return to Big Finish after over 6 years since the early adventures release, The Home Guard. The first Doctor Adventures returns with Beware the City of Illusions by Nicholas Briggs, which closes off a trilogy of stories involving the first Doctor, voiced by Stephen Noonan, reuniting with his former companions decades after their adventures together. Here, the Doctor and Polly, albeit an earlier Doctor who hasn't met Polly yet, investigate a new net zero city with a secret. Lauren Cornelius also returns as the voice for Dodo, who also appeared in the previous stories Fugitive of the Daleks in January 2024 and The Living Darkness in January 2025, having begun voicing Dodo in The Secrets of Det Sen in the Early Adventures range in August 2021. This announcement was followed a few days later with the release of the 12th series of The War Master starring Derek Jacobi, entitled His Greatest Trick. Here we have 4 new stories chronicling the War Master on the run from the Daleks and Time Lords alike during the Time War, beginning with The Grievance Bureau by Lizzie Hopley, then over to an alien girls' school in Last Girl Standing by Catherine Armitage, falling into an Earth Empire refugee camp in The Worst of All Evils by Ian Winterson, and finally a confrontation with the cult of the Infinite's Great Engine in The Blue Shift Ritual by Adam Christopher. This box set is the first of the range not to be produced by Scott Hancock, with Robert Valentine taking the helm. Having written for an endless amount of Big Finish stories, mostly for the 6th Doctor adventures, and putting his producing skills to work from Dark Gallifrey, Robert Valentine also tries his hand as a director for these 4 stories as well. The War Master's flight will continue in October 2026 with another 4 stories in Deeds Without Name. And a couple days on from this, the first box set for Series 15 of the 4th Doctor adventures was announced. 2 stories featuring Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor and Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane in The Ministry of Death by Robert Valentine, seeing the Doctor and Sarah Jane meeting back up with the Brigadier and Harry Sullivan in The Inhuman Empire by Phil Mulrine, as the duo investigate alien activity at the National Museum. Also, I only found this out here, but these stories were recorded in 2020. That's nearly 6 years ago. In fact, this was recorded only a year after Sadie Miller's first story as Sarah Jane, Return of the Cybermen, which released in 2021. I had no idea that a number of these recent 4th Doctor adventures were recorded up to 6 years before their release. Is that normal for Big Finish, or is it just something to do with Tom Baker? I'm not personally too sure. Moving one incarnation back, the newest 6-part box set in the third Doctor Adventures was released, entitled Operation Vengeance, with Tim Treloar as the third Doctor and making his Big Finish writing debut, and Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane. They, alongside the Brigadier, investigate the impacts of a previous visit to Consomia by the Doctor in 1940s Dunkirk, with Jo Grant somehow stuck in the centre of it all. The next box set was also announced as The Imposters by Alan Barnes, which sees the Doctor and Sarah Jane encounter a whole host of unique happenings, from wrestling to a plot to control the weather, as well as Sarah Jane and Liz Shaw's first meeting, due for release in February 2026. It's the end of an era for 2 audio-related releases. Doctor Who and the Loch Ness Monster was released on CD on the 16th, marking the final story from the Daleks to Rose to be released in BBC audiobook form. I spoke a little bit about this last month for the digital audiobook release, and Doctor Who magazine met with Michael Stevens to talk about the entire range from its conception in 2005 to now, as well as including a nice new poster for my background. Isn't that cool? This will probably fit in very nicely with my aesthetic. Although I just find it so funny because obviously it starts with Rose, which is obviously the first episode of the revival series. But then obviously it doesn't actually have an unearthly child because of varying rights issues. So it's an interesting poster because it cuts off the first story and then adds an extra one at the end. But over on the Big Finish side of things, it's time to say goodbye to the Torchwood monthly range. Beginning in September 2015 with The Conspiracy, Big Finish has now announced the final 4 stories in the anthological. No, that doesn't sound right. Big Finish has now announced the final 4 stories in the anthology Torchwood range for release over the next few months. The Flawless Man by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle follows Andy investigating an unfinished horror film in November. Everyone's Dead on Floor 3 by James Goss sees Torchwood Soho's Norton investigate sketchy happenings at a mysterious firm where everyone has died in January 2026. Curtain by James Goss in March 2026 sees the return of Billis Manger from Torchwood Series 1, who last appeared in The Sublime Port by James Goss in the War Master Rogue Encounters, and in Torchwood in Sigil by Ash Darby in 2023. And finally, the big one, release number 100, sees Yanto and Tommy Pierce prepare to face a Cyberman in the village of Wet Wang, ending on a high, clearly, in Farewell by Joseph Litster in May 2026. Although, really, it's release 104 if you count a few of the specials, the Mr. Colchester specials, or 105 if you count Absent Friends. So with 100 releases over 10 years, the Torchwood monthly range is no more. With that being said, one final release entitled Torchwood Legacy will be released in September and October 2027 in 2 volumes, with James Goss noting it has all been recorded and is a celebration of 20 years of Torchwood and 10 years of Torchwood at Big Finish, although I'm sure we all know who will not be involved. But not all is lost, as after years of complaints, the Series 10 soundtrack has been officially confirmed to be on its way. Notably, following Murray Gold's departure from Doctor Who after Series 10, fans were really quick to note that we were missing any official release, whether that be digital or physical, of the Series 10 soundtrack. We'd come to expect a release, as every series would receive something up to Series 10 and even afterwards, with Sega Nakanola's scores for Series 11 to Flux. We don't have any other information regarding this, no release date, nothing, and we have no idea whether to be also expecting releases for the 60th anniversary specials, Season 1 and Season 2, but one can hope. And also in the audio world, we got an announcement of a Record Store Day exclusive 2 LP release of the 2010 BBC audio story The Last Voyage by Dan Abnett, due for release on the 28th of November. Before we finish off, let's rattle off the rest of the smaller releases. Early in the month, we got an updated 2025 release of the 2011 book 100 Scariest Monsters, released by BBC Books, also 10 years after its republication as part of the Ultimate Time and Space collection. Later on, we also returned to our good old favourite Bernice Summerfield in the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield Volume 9, The Dalek Eternity 2, following on directly from the first part in September, and sees Benny encounter a Sontaran and Draconian attempting to stop an endless war in The Winner's Tale by Alex Hewitt, and another confrontation with the Daleks in Oversoul by Melissa F. Olson. The following parts to Volume 9 are due to be released in November and December 2025. The winner of this year's Paul Spragg Memorial Short Trips opportunity was announced as Luke Hollins with his script The Wednesday That Wasn't, which handily entails what happens when someone hands in a whole Wednesday into the Galactic Lost Property Office. This story will be available to download for free in December. The final Big Finish release of October was their Halloween special Sea Smoke and Other Stories, which delves into the spooky side of Doctor Who with Sea Smoke by Jonathan Sims, Party Favours by Georgia Cook, Bramble King by Noga Flation, and Merlin's Trap by Hannah Kennedy. And finally, The Elephant in the Room, the newest limited edition collection release. Season 13 with iconic stories such as Pyramids of Mars and my favourite here, The Brain of Morbius. The special features here include Behind the Sofas for all 6 episodes, talks with Graham Harper and Tom Baker, the Tales of the TARDIS edit of Pyramids of Mars, and the omnibus versions from repeat screenings of Pyramids, Morbius, and a new edit for The Seeds of Doom. There's also updated special effects on Terror of the Zygons and a bunch of other bits and pieces, including a profile of Harry Sullivan actor Ian Marter. However, the big takeaway from this release is the egregious AI upscaling seen throughout these stories. When comparing this release with their DVD counterparts, it's easy to notice the unfortunate softening and sharpening applied through the use of AI upscaling, not even adding detail, but making people in particular look like puppets or autons, I suppose. It's a shame to see this despite having great upscales in releases like Season 20, Season 7, or even my favourite upscale, Series 3. Especially when considering the price tag is £50. Those purchasing these box sets are looking for the best way to view their favourite stories, and AI upscaling is just not what we want. That's not to say there shouldn't be upscaling, but seeing as it's not like you get an option to watch a HD but not AI upscaled version, more time and care really should be taken here. However, this also now means that the final 4th Doctor season to be released will be the key to time. My favourite classic Doctor Who season, but I just hope that by the time that rolls around, they've taken the time to actually make the show look as good as it can be. So there you have it. October was a wild ride from start to finish. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these releases. I'm particularly interested in the Jubilee and Chimes of Midnight novelizations because I loved Robert Shearman's Dalek novelization a few years back. Not long now until we'll be talking about the war between the land and the sea, so do let me know how you're feeling about that. But till then, I'm Sam, and this was This Month in Doctor Who.